All right, good morning. We obviously have a guest speaker today. We're talking about STIs, which I know you're all very excited to learn about today. So I'm going to hand the floor over to Jasmine. Please feel free to give her your full attention, ask her any questions you might have. Yeah, they're all yours.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I'm very excited to be here. This time we're going to talk about sex at like 10 a.m. Last time I think I did at 8:30. So, we're getting later in the day. But my name is Jasmine. I work at the Student Health Center. Who knows about the Student Health Center? Woohoo! So I just gave you a service card. I won't go too much into that right now. We can talk about it more at the end. So I want to make sure we have time for all these wonderful talks on STIs and sexual health. But there's free STI testing there, free physical and mental health for students. So definitely a good resource to utilize. I'm the health educator there. So I'm in charge of all things health education for students. I also love hearing like what you feel like you need more of, what's missing in the conversation. So my door, well, it's not always technically open, but when I'm there, please feel free always to stop by or email me and chat with me saying like, hey, I wish we had more information on this. I always want to do what works best for you. But today we're going to talk about sexual health and STIs. Yay. So I do a little disclaimer first, right? So sexual health, there can be some things that are kind of graphic. Something, if it's triggering for you, please feel free to step out or do what you need to do to take care of yourself. Also, when it comes to sexual health, I know that not everyone's sexually active or interested in being sexually active. My goal today is to talk about STIs and then also talk about safer sex practices across the span of all different forms of sex in the event that you do engage in that form of sex, or if you're talking to a friend or anything else, that you can best protect yourself if you choose to do so. And then again, I try to have fun with this. It is a serious topic, but I use bright colors and talk about a lot of things so that it's a little less like that dark and like terrible pictures of just like scarring images, right? I want this to be a fun and engaging conversation. Stop me at any time. I have a lot of content, so I tend to go through pretty quickly. If you need me to slow down, I'm happy to slow down. If you have any questions, this is a free space for questions. If I don't know the answer, I will get back to you. All right. So again, we're talking about STIs, but I like to think of it as sexual health in general, right? So the World Health Organization defines sexual health as a state of physical, mental, and social well-being in relation to sexuality. It requires a positive and respectful approach to sexuality and sexual relationships, as well as the possibility of having pleasurable and safe sexual experiences free of coercion, discrimination, and violence. So in some of my other talks, we'll talk a lot more too about like consent. We'll talk more about like the history of sexual health, laws, all of that. Today, just for the purpose of this class, we're going to kind of first talk about STIs and then about like safer sex practices. Also, before jumping into it, I just want to acknowledge that sexuality, sex, and gender all play into sexual health. When we talk about sexual health information, a lot of times scientifically, it's kind of been talked about in a binary, right? Female, male. That doesn't apply to everyone. So I do my best to try to think of things in a broader spectrum. But if something is referring to anatomy, just know that that's just more from the scientific anatomy, but that really gender, sexuality, sexual orientation, it's a wide spectrum, and that a lot of different things play into it. All right, so I want to hear from you. In the past, whether that was high school or wherever you've learned about sexual health, what has that looked like for you? Did you feel like you got everything you needed? Was anything missing? What did you like? What did you not like? Yeah.
Main thing. Partner and I can grow with, so that's enough.
Yep. Hear you there for sure. What else? Yeah.
Total basics, nothing that crazy, but I did an acting class in high school, and that one was actually super
Helpful.
and useful information about it.
Yeah, definitely. What else? Anything else? Yeah.
Oh, when I was 12, I took a class, like a class they called Heart to Heart,
Oh,
which was it's everything we had. My mom gave me one of those like puberty books,
yep.
and I went to this thing where they basically talked about, you know, you're gonna get period. and,
Yeah, yeah.
You know. You're gonna want to start kissing boys, and not want to start.
Yeah. So it's definitely tends to be pretty like, yeah. I these are all very valid and similar experiences. I think there's one more hand and then else. Yeah.
So we learned about like woodwork and
Yeah.
very like extreme things.
Yeah, very extreme things. Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I know I'm a little bit older than some of you, but like for me, it was like if you have sex before marriage, you die. But then if you marry a man, you'll be fine. And like that's what I feel like, right? That was what like my sexual health experience was like.
Will get chlamydia.
Yeah,
and
you will get chlamydia and you will die. So we are going to talk about STIs and there are some like pictures of that and it is important to talk about, but we're also just going to talk about more like preventative and safety measures for that. So again, the goal is like, I think there's a general trend. It tends to be pretty like male, female, and like reproductive base and all of that. So I definitely want to have more conversations today than that. So like I said, we're going to cover STIs first. Not the funnest thing in the world. There'll be some pictures. We'll talk about like what they are, how they spread, and then we'll get into safer sex practices. And then as you can see, after two, I've got like a whole desk full of sexual health brochures. So you're welcome to help yourself to any of those. So that covers just about all of it. If you find something missing, please let me know. I'm happy to make it. Okay, so safer sex practices. So when we talk about STIs, the reason it's so important is I think also too in a lot of the classes, like they show you these horrendous pictures and you like kind of have that assumption that like, well, if someone has an STI, you'll see this like horrendous sight, right? Because it's like they make these, that's like all they kind of teach you. But 80% of people who have STIs don't show any symptoms, right? So that's the importance of continually getting tested. The most common STIs among the college population are HPV, chlamydia, and herpes. So chlamydia, start off with that one. Chlamydia is spread through vaginal, anal, and oral sex. The infection itself can be carried in semen, pre-ejaculation fluid, vaginal fluids, and chlamydia can infect the penis, vagina, cervix, anus, urethra, eyes, and throat. So it's also, we'll talk about some of that when it comes to, I see like the faces now, it's like, right, some of how different STIs can be transmitted. And so one of the biggest risks with chlamydia is that it can lead to infertility if left untreated. So what are the symptoms of chlamydia? Here's my pictures. Brace for impact. Sometimes there's no symptoms, right? We just talked about that. Sometimes there's burning with urination, pain with sex, there can be discharge, bleeding between periods. And then again, if it goes unnoticed for a while, symptoms can become vague or absent. So it's something where like you can have some of the symptoms, maybe not really pay attention, and they can get a little bit more absent or unnoticeable. But that's, again, the risk is that it can be kind of causing damage. So for testing, it depends on, this is why it's so important to talk about the type of sex you engage in, if you engage in sex, right? So you can do a urine test. Also, often when they do a pap test, right, they will test for STIs at the same time, or if they're worried about cervical infection. And then a lot of the times it's going to be site specific. So if you're engaging in oral sex and there's concern of chlamydia transmitting, they'll actually test like the oral region or rectal, genitals, wherever they feel that it could be infected. And then, so good news, right? Treatment is antibiotics, and then it's really important to test and treat any partners or any exposure. So chlamydia is definitely a treatable STI, and again, the importance of getting tested and knowing so that you can get treatment and any partners can also get treatment. All right, we survived chlamydia. Moving on to HPV. Human papillomavirus. So there's more than 200 types of HPV. How many people have heard of HPV? Because I feel like it's like all the commercials, right? It's like, if you knew when you were 9. So there's 40 kinds of genital specific infections with HPV. And again, this can infect the vulva, vagina, cervix, rectum, anus, penis, scrotum, mouth, and throat. So what a line to walk into. Welcome. Feel free to turn back. I'm just kidding. I'm shocked no one's like just open the door and be like, nope. So all of these forms of HPV can be spread during sexual contact. And then there's also other types that cause warts, right? Like hand warts, warts on the feet, things like that, but those aren't the sexually transmitted ones. The two types of HPV that are most associated with genital warts are type 6 and 11. So not that that's like, you're like, I'm gonna go remember type 6 and 11, but there's two that are primarily associated with genital warts. And there's at least 12 types of HPV that can lead to cancer potentially. These two types are usually type 16 and 18. So cervical cancer is the most commonly linked to HPV, and HPV can also cause cancer in the vulva, vagina, penis, anus, mouth, and throat. So it's not just cervical cancer. HPV can cause cancer in other areas. So it's a very, very prevalent infection, right? There's about 43 million HPV infections. This was in 2018, so I don't have the like most up-to-date version. But HPV is super easy to spread, especially even in skin-to-skin contact. And then again, we kind of covered all of the areas you can get it, but being that it can spread skin to skin, it's not just from like vaginal sexual fluids or semen or something like that. And again, it can be spread even if there's no like specific sexual activity, you know, there's not like penis being inserted anywhere, it can still spread because it has skin to skin transmission. So a lot of people don't know they have HPV. One of the ways it's often caught is with an abnormal pap test. So for someone with a cervix, that's like when they can see like, oh, okay, there's an abnormal pap test, and that can be from HPV, and they'll test that. Other people will have warts, so small like flesh colored raised bumps. They can be a single one, there can be clusters, and then often they're non-painful. So testing, visualization is a big one. So there's actually no currently approved testing for men or people with a penis. For individuals with a cervix, they'll do a pap test or visualization. And then for prevention, the vaccination is one of the best ways. So since HPV vaccination was first recommended back in 2006, we've seen that genital warts have dropped 88% among teen girls and 81% among young adult women. So that's like, woohoo, yay, public health. But there's no actual treatment for the virus itself. So this is something while they will manage it with like treating warts, they can manage it in other ways. But again, testing, visualization, and vaccination are some of the best ways. Yes. So a lot of times with things like HPV, it will like go away or go dormant. A lot of them are clearable. And then some of them though, they either come back because they're like, oh, it's in the system, or like that's what the commercials will say, right? Like for some people, the virus clears on its own. And then for others, right, it doesn't go away. And so it just kind of depends on the person, and it's just kind of important to know that baseline.
HIV med, if you have it like long term.
Yeah. So HIV, usually though, once infected, there's always the element of infection, right? You can get to undetectable and all of that, which is awesome, and we'll talk about that. But for HPV, some people will clear the virus, and then again, not all of it. Yeah. And then some people won't clear the virus. Yeah. Yeah. So it can be like getting warts removed, you know, not having sexual activity if you're having a flare up, things like that. Another question? Yeah.
Like practice and like visualization.
So visualization would be like if you suspect a wart and they see a wart, they'll like remove that. They'll usually like freeze it off, something like that. So it's just like examining it. Yeah. Other questions? So good job. We got to the next slide. So if there's a wart, there's something that needs to be removed. They can do like cryotherapy. So they freeze it off. They can also surgically remove it. There's also other cervical precancer treatments. And then there, even when found, so when found early, it's always better, right? So there's, even when there's HPV related cancers, they're often very treatable, especially when found early. So it's again, something that we shouldn't be like terrified of, but just so educate ourselves on. Okay, we survived HPV. Woo! On to herpes. So herpes is again so I'm covering like the super common infections, right? Herpes is also very common. More than half of Americans have oral herpes. So oral herpes is considered HSV1. Genital herpes is considered HSV2. However, they're actually interchangeable. So I don't know if anyone ever still says like 69, right? But thinking about oral sex, things like that. Genital herpes can spread to the mouth, And then oral herpes can spread to genitals. So you can have HSV1 in the genital region, and vice versa. Yeah. So that's why HSV1 is so common. Like people, I feel like especially when I grew up, everyone shared everything. I feel like with COVID, it's a little less like that, but people are like, here, have my drink, here, have some of my food. And so that's where like you can get it passed down from family, you can get it passed down from like sharing things, especially oral herpes. That's why like half of the population has it. It's like the common cold sore. Yeah.
So don't give head if you have cold sore.
It's a great, that's a great advice. Yes. That is definitely true. So again, since it can pop up in so many places, it can, I won't read again all of the terms. I think we're getting the idea, right? It can spread to all the parts. It can also spread to like inner thighs, lips, mouth, and then rarely eyes. But everyone's just like, no, everyone's like, let's go back to like a 6-foot radius. And I said rarely. Okay, so herpes is another STI that's spread from skin to skin contact. We kind of already covered, you can get it by having different exchange, whether that's oral sex or other forms of sex. So like the advice previously stated, right? Don't necessarily have sex with someone that has an open sore. We kind of talked about it can be passed from saliva, it can be passed from genital fluids and skin in the oral area of a partner with oral herpes, and then skin in the genital area of a partner with genital herpes. So back to kind of what we covered before. Symptoms, there can be no symptoms. It's just like everything else. There can be no symptoms. And then a lot of times though, there's blisters, right? There's some sort of painful blister or that cold sore. And then it can look a lot like other problems. So it can look like, oh, like contact dermatitis or an ingrown hair or acne. But that's again, the importance of making sure like you're getting STI tests and you're having a healthcare provider to make sure that it's, you know, there's an ingrown hair and it's not like a herpes sore. The symptoms, like sometimes I struggle for the pictures. I'm like, all right, try not to scar people too much. But so the symptoms, there can be burning with urination. Someone can have trouble urinating because if there's any sores or swelling, it can kind of block the urethra. There can be itching or pain around the genitals. And then specifically with HSV2, which is less common than HSV1, there can be swollen glands in the pelvic area, throat, and under your arms. So it's like your lymph nodes, right, fighting an infection. Fever, chills, headache, feeling achy and tired. I know some people say that like before certain outbreaks, like they don't feel well or they have a headache, and that's probably because your body's trying to fight a virus, right? So for testing, visualization, they can also culture it, and then they can run blood to see if you have like the antibodies or the virus present. No cure for herpes, but there's medication that can manage outbreaks and hurt less. Yeah, I heard you. Yeah, gonorrhea. Gonorrhea is an STI that can cause infection in the genitals, rectum, and throat. It's actually very common. Again, we talked about this being one of the more popular college age STIs. So it's most common in people ages 15 to 24. So it doesn't mean if you're 25, you're in the clear. It's just most common in that range. So symptoms for this one, I love like the faces, like I just look up and like, I'm sorry. Painful or burning sensation when peeing. There can be increased vaginal discharge, vaginal bleeding between periods, a white, yellow, or green discharge from the penis. Painful or swollen testicles is less common, but it can be a thing. The biggest thing if there are symptoms is discharge. So there's often discharge. If it's an anal infection, there can be anal itching and general soreness, bleeding, painful bowel movements, depending on where the infection is. So this is like the common discharge. And then up above is oral gonorrhea. So I just want to make sure everyone has a picture for everything. So testing, you can do urine testing and then swab the location. So again, if there's concern of oral infection, they can swab the throat. rectum, things like that. Treatable with antibiotics. Yay. It is becoming harder to treat. So there's been like a thing with drug resistant strains of gonorrhea, and that's why it's so important to get tested and treated, and that partners get tested and treated. And then if necessary, they can see like which antibiotic is most effective for that strain of gonorrhea. And then if for some reason prescribed antibiotics and there's not like really rapid improvement, it's important to return, because if that is the more drug resistant strain, they may need to change the antibiotic course, and it's always best to take like the most specific antibiotic for an infection. All right, on to HIV. I promise we're almost done with the STIs. So there's approximately 1.2 million people in the US who have HIV. About 13% of individuals don't know that they have it and need testing. So that's something that's really important to think about. HIV continues to have a disproportionate impact on certain populations. So particularly racial and ethnic minorities, and gay, bisexual, and other men who have sex with men. I think there's one, I've heard people before in other classes say like, oh, I was told like I don't have to worry about HIV because it's just like a gay male disease. That's not true, right? That's like that should not be being taught in classes. But there are communities that, for a lot of reasons, which I won't get into like my whole public health background, are disproportionately impacted, but it is something that can infect anyone. So there's approximately 34,800 new HIV infections in the US in 2019. So in 2020, men who have sex with men accounted for 71% of new infections. And then people who acquired HIV through heterosexual contact made up 22%. And then in 2019, among females, the largest percentage of HIV infection was attributed to heterosexual contact. So again, that's kind of just showing like it can impact anyone. From 2015 to 2019, new infections among young men who had sex with men dropped 33% overall. So that's really great. And we'll talk about some of the reasons why regarding PrEP and PEP and all of that. But we saw that with Black and African American and Hispanic and Latino men who have sex with men, there tends to be a disproportionate impact. So a lot to unpack there. So there's different symptoms with HIV. HIV is like really complicated in terms of like, we could spend a whole class talking just about that, right? But some people have flu-like symptoms in the first stage, and then in stage 2, the virus is starting to multiply. And they may not feel sick anymore. They may not have symptoms. And this is where it becomes a chronic infection. But without treatment, people can stay in this stage for 10 or 15 years. So with treatment now, that's like, a lot is changing. But previously we saw that some people maintain,
Blood to blood contact, like
blood to blood, and like bodily fluids. So it's not something that you get from like kissing someone, right?
Yeah,
It's
so,
not,
like,
or sharing a water fountain or like any of that.
Consume someone's blood.
Yeah, so usually too, like blood, like if you have an open sore and like someone infected, or if, like you see sometimes too, individuals who inject drugs may be at risk. There used to be, this now usually is like very tested out, but blood transfusion, right? So those were like some of the things. And this is still where, again, I won't get into it, but you can talk about all of the our blood laws now, and if they're still kind of antiquated in terms of who can donate blood and all of that.
Like gay men can't donate blood.
And there's a lot of conversation on that, right? Because it's not asking about like sexual history or practice. It's kind of just saying like, if you have this, then even though we can like test very rapidly and all of those things now. So a lot of things to think about as far as equity. But so eventually, if the virus weakens the body's immune system, this is what we know as AIDS, right? So this is when there's acquired immunodeficiency syndrome. This is when you'll see like rapid weight loss, reoccurring fevers, extreme tiredness, swollen glands, sore pneumonia. That was like one of the ways it was initially discovered, was a kind of a rare pneumonia, and a lot of other kind of neurological symptoms in general. So there's there's 3 different types of testing. You can do antibody testing, and this is going to look for antibodies to HIV in the blood or oral fluid. It's the most rapid test and the only HIV self-test approved by the US. So there are places you can do like an at-home self-test for HIV. Then there's also the antigen or antibody test. And this looks for HIV antibodies and antigens. So this is going to be a lab-based test and it involves drawing blood. There's also a rapid antigen and antibody test that you can do from a finger stick. So they'll like poke your finger and then do it that way. And then there's the nucleic acid test or NAT, and NAT looks for the actual virus in the blood. So this is going to be a blood draw, and then they send the sample to the lab for testing. This can actually tell like how much of the virus is present. So this is when you see like here viral load, that's what we're talking about. So treatment, right? So HIV treatment continues to evolve, which is really great. And so there's highly effective medicines called ART or antiretroviral therapy. And this works to control the virus. So essentially like a lot of the campaign is U equals U, right? So undetectable equals untransmittable. So if someone is on ART and they don't have a viral load that is detectable, they cannot transmit the virus. There's also PEP and PrEP. So PrEP is pre-exposure prophylaxis and PEP is post-exposure prophylaxis. So individuals who might be at higher risk for contracting HIV can talk to their healthcare provider about PrEP, and this essentially prevents getting the virus. PEP is something that if someone feels like they were exposed to HIV, if you take it within a certain amount of time, it can also prevent transmission of the virus. Okay, so the other ones that we're not going to talk about, but like things to, there's a lot of STIs out there. There's bacterial vaginosis, which can be spread through sexual contact, syphilis, trish, there's some parasitic infections, canker, there's so many, but I feel like I've given you enough information on the STIs. So if you have any questions, let me know about specific ones. But my wrap up is, who knows which STIs are the non-curable ones? So you can't just give antibiotics. There's 4. Yeah. Herpes.
As long as it's
HIV, yeah. HIV, okay, herpes, HIV. What else we got? Yeah. Gonorrhea can be treated with, those can be treated with antibiotics, but good call because we did cover those. Any other guesses? HPV. Good job. So I think we got just about all of them. HPV, herpes, HIV, and hepatitis. Hepatitis isn't super common, but it is, hepatitis C can be transmitted through sexual activity. So that was like the bonus one, but all the other ones we talked about today. So the 4 H's, but just because they're not curable does not mean they're not manageable or treatable. All right. Who's ready for safer sex practices? Moving right along. Okay, so again, this is going to cover a lot of different forms of sexual intercourse. I like to include data from the actual school. So we did the college health assessment over the fall. And what we found out was that at Moorpark College, about 10% of cis women reported having female sexual partners, and about 10% of cis men reported having male sexual partners. And 4% of individuals reported having sexual partners who identified as genderqueer, right? So it's important that we're talking about all forms of sex, not the like what we experienced where it was like, okay, this is it, right? Use a condom and all is well. And then again, genitals don't equal gender. So it's really important to know your risk for pregnancy. So some people who have transitioned medically or in other ways, it's always important to talk to a healthcare provider to know if there's risk of pregnancy. I'm going to cover more like the barrier methods for STI prevention and just a little bit on potential pregnancy prevention. So kind of just starting with contraception, there's a lot of different forms. I have like resources up here. So types of birth control. If you have specific questions, the important part that I want to bring into this is someone on various birth control methods doesn't mean that there's STI protection, right? And so that's a really important thing to think about. If you are engaging in sexual activities where you are trying to prevent a pregnancy, it's still important to think about if there's STI protection. So really like STI protection comes from external and internal condoms, right? So someone can be on birth control and still use a condom or something like that. So we're going to talk about barrier methods today. And barrier methods can be used for penetration, for sex toys, hand penetration, oral sex, genital stimulation. So we're going to cover a lot of different things. So we're just gonna kind of go through the list, the gamut of different activities. So starting with hand stuff, it's really important to wash your hands. And this is because you don't want to transmit any type of bacteria, or especially like vaginally, it has a sensitive pH system. If you introduce that, you can throw off the pH system, things like that. And then also don't mix hands. So if you're touching someone else, it's a good idea not to touch yourself with that same hand, because we talked about the spread of like, if you have sexual fluids, that's how you can transmit something, right? And then also be nail mindful, so they can irritate the inner walls of the vagina or front holes. Some people prefer that term. If you're irritating the walls and you're creating maybe microabrasions, that's also going to increase the risk of potential infection. Some people like to wear a glove or a finger condom to be safe, or if they have any like open cuts or wounds on their hands. But again, the biggest risk comes from like touching yourself, touching a partner. And then hands that like exposed hands can increase pH imbalances and yeast infection. And it can also be beneficial to use lube, again, to reduce any like abrasion or anything like that. Overall, the risk of passing an STI from like fingering or something like that is relatively low. I kind of covered it already. If you touch your parts, touch someone else's, or vice versa, that's going to be where the risk comes from. Of all the risks, HPV has been found under the nails of individuals. And so it can, in theory, be passed from skin to skin contact. But really evidence shows this is relatively uncommon. It's also possible to transmit gonorrhea, especially like fingers to anus. But if you reduce the risk of spreading like body fluids between people, you reduce the risk of transmitting an STI. All right, on to oral sex. So at Moore College, over 55% of students report having oral sex. Almost 30% have had oral sex in the last 2 weeks. And about 90% report not using a protective barrier method for oral sex in the past 30 days. So little like statistics right from here. So there's a lot of different ways you can protect yourself from if you're engaging in oral sex, depending on the type of oral sex you're having. So if you're performing oral sex on a penis, you can use a condom. Flavored condoms are okay for oral sex, but not recommended for vaginal sex because it can, again, change the pH. So some people prefer using flavored condoms. If you're performing oral sex on a vagina, front hole, or anus, you can use a dental dam. So I brought one because a lot of people have never seen a dental dam. So exciting. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, dun. It's had a lot of demos, so it's gotta give me a second here to. It's basically like a thin latex sheet. And so that can be used as a barrier method. They also come flavored if you would like. That can be used as a barrier method to prevent like transmission. Again, like things like that will reduce, we talked about herpes spreading, things like that. I will say this gets me like, so I had bought a bunch of these for our Valentine's Day outreach, and I like could not find them anywhere. And then when I found them, they were like $1 each online. So there's a little bit of health equity that we could chat about. But if you don't have access to that, or you don't want to order it online, also you can always come pop by my office and I still have some left. You can make your own dental dam. So you can like get a condom and then you can like just cut the tip off and like cut down the side. And it's not quite as pretty, but it still does the job. Or people also use like non-microwavable plastic wrap. So that's an option too. That's technically not like FDA approved or tested, but at least it's something, right? So now I have like nice little strawberry lube on my hands. But so there's options for making dental dams or buying dental dams and just having them in bulk, or again, stop by the student health center. Also, for oral sex, some people have what's referred to as a T penis. So if someone has started testosterone, this can enlarge the clitoris, and condoms may not fit. So condoms usually are an easy option, right? But also dental dams might not fix, they might slip off or not fit. So if someone has a T penis, they can make a cape out of a medical glove. And essentially you do this just by like cutting all the fingers off and leaving the thumb. Again, the goal is like some of this doesn't have like unfortunately the most, accessible versions for barrier methods, but the goal is to try to do something to prevent, genital fluid spreading and things like that. So these are just the best methods. So put my dental dam away. So most STIs can be passed through oral sex. And so that's when you see like 90% of people don't use any barrier method. We know you can get chlamydia, you can get gonorrhea, you can get HPV, you can get herpes, you can get syphilis, you can get HIV, all through oral sex. Again, it tends to spread depending on, someone could have an oral infection and spread that to the genitals, or someone could have a genital infection and spread that to the person who's performing oral sex. I already covered that fun tidbit. So this is why if you do see a healthcare provider about sexual health, it's so important to like talk about the types of sexual activities you engage in case they do need to do site testing. I think this is something that kind of like in general, the healthcare system has let people down on, right? Because there's also like assumptions like, oh, if you're sexually active, this is the type of sex you're having, right? So be clear about the types of sex you have. And just be like, hey, you should update your intake forms. These suck. But so now we're gonna talk about toy stuff, right? The biggest risk in sharing toys is if they're not properly cleaned or if you're going partner to partner or partners. So if you plan on switching people, this is where like going back to, okay, maybe I didn't know I could use a condom in my life, but here's where it comes in. You can put a condom on a sex toy. And then if you change people, you can just change the condom. So if you're not gonna go like wash it and clean it and everything else, that's like the safest method to share toys. Or you can have, don't share toys. Also, if you switch from vaginal to anal penetration, again, use a new condom or clean it. If you do use a toy for anal sex, make sure it's anal safe. So it should say that on like the package. But in general too, it'll have like a wide flare base. And then just safe storage tips. If a toy has batteries, it's a good idea to remove batteries if you're not going to use it for a while, just to prevent any like acid leaking and all of that. And then also make sure you read the instructions on how to store toys safely. So, make sure they're cleaned properly, stored in the correct climate, and all of that good stuff. But yeah, so it's easy. You can just clean them with soap. But there's a lot of like things too. They'll advertise like, oh, use this toy cleaner and everything else. But some people actually have like allergic reactions to those. So soap and water tends to be like the best method, or however the instructions say. So again, any STI technically can be passed by sharing a sex toy, again, because you're passing like fluids. But what we see is there's actually an increased risk in BV, so bacteria vaginosis, in women who have sex with women and share toys without proper cleaning. So it's estimated that among women who have sex with women, there's about 25 to 55%. So nice statistic, right? They're like, it could be a quarter, could be half. That have spread through sexual contact with sex toys. And so we know that that's something that, again, it's changing pH, you're switching body fluids, things like that. If you're using sex toys and penetration involves bloods, cuts, or wounds, that's also going to increase your risk of things like HIV, hepatitis B and C. So just be mindful of tearing the skin. Lube can help reduce the risks, all of those good things. All right, have I lost anyone yet? Still with me? On to anal sex. All right. If inserting a penis, the best method is to use an external condom. An external condom, if like that's not in the picture or that person won't wear an external condom, you can use an internal condom. So has anyone ever seen an internal condom before? Oh, good. What a class. For anyone who has it. So internal condoms tend to be called female condoms, but again, they can be used, they can be inserted into the anus. You want to remove this internal ring first, and then you can insert that. For toys, again, you can use condoms on a toy. Always make sure they're safe. I should have brought like little wet ones. And then the reason it's so important to make sure they're safe is that objects can be drawn up into the rectum. So if they're not anal safe, they like essentially there can be almost like a vacuum system, and it can be drawn up. So this does happen and it can't be immediately retrieved. You have to make sure that you like seek medical attention, especially if there's like batteries. It's like important to take that serious. All right. Use lube. So the anus doesn't have a lubrication system built in, right? And there's thinner skin. And so this can increase the risk of skin tears, which is why we see such like a high transmission of STIs. And you can also have bacterial infections from that. So use lube, use lube, use lube, use lube. Also just use lube. And then is douching necessary? So there's different, like for everyone, it's different as far as what they want to do. I have like a whole sheet here that has like a link to a really like informative package if that's something you want to look at. But technically speaking, so there's normally only like poo in the rectum if you need to go to the bathroom. And so some people don't feel the need to douche because they're like, well, it's all good there. And then some people feel more comfortable doing that. If you do decide to douche, it's important to use like water at body temperature. And it's recommended to use a small bowl douche because it's easier to control. And there's also over-the-counter things you can buy at a pharmacy that tend to be made more for like constipation. So again, there's more information, scan the QR code. Anal sex is a higher risk of spreading STIs than many other forms of sexual activity. Again, we talked about this, thin lining to the anus, no lubrication. And so that makes it susceptible to being like torn or damaged and more vulnerable to infection. So basically everything we talked about can be spread through anal sex. The FDA has now approved condoms specifically designed for anal sex that are stronger than regular condoms. So that's kind of cool. Reduces the chance of breaking. And then if using condoms, it's best to use water-based lube. So what back to like use lube, use water-based lube. All right. So scissoring or other forms of genital rubbing. So vulva contact can spread STIs, especially herpes and HPV because of the skin-to-skin contact. Gonorrhea and chlamydia can also be spread when body fluids are involved. Some people will use lube to hold the dental dam in place or use condoms depending on the type of what they're doing. But it's not always super easy to use a barrier method. And so this goes back where it's like the best idea is to get tested, know everyone's status, and then that can be the best way to reduce the risk of STIs. All right, we're almost done, I promise. All right, so vaginal and penile penetration. So here at Moore Park, 48% of students responded that they didn't use a condom for vaginal penile sex within the past 30 days. About 20% did not use any method to prevent pregnancy with penile and vaginal sex, and over 20% reported using withdrawal as a birth control method. So withdrawal has about like a 1 in 5 chance of pregnancy. So just things to think about when we go back to the types of birth control methods, that chart there. So we talked about this, right? Being on birth control doesn't protect against STIs. So especially if partners haven't been tested, always use a barrier method to reduce the risk of STIs, and make sure to use the proper size condoms. So we'll talk more about condoms in just a second, but not all condoms also are made for STI protection. So you can go to like a store and they'll have novelty condoms, and those aren't always like technically approved for STI protection. So I see some faces like they'll like glow in the dark condoms or things like that that aren't necessarily like, they're meant for fun, but not like for STI protection. And again, flavored condoms aren't recommended for vaginal sex because they may alter pH. All right. External condoms tend to offer the easiest form of STI protection. However, I also like to make sure people know that they have different options. So if someone's with a partner that won't use an external condom, they can also use an internal condom. You can also stop by the health center or my office, and I do have some of those if you're interested in that. Internal condoms get inserted into the vagina during sex and then removed after. Some people do prefer this because I feel like there's like more movement and flow. So up to you and your partner or partners. Never, ever use 2 external condoms or an internal and external condom, because that can create friction that actually causes them to break. So people are like, I want to be extra safe, I'm going to double up. Don't double up. It is not extra safe. It can cause them to break. Again, back to, I just got to drop that like health equity in there. I went to go buy internal condoms and they were like $6 each. So that's an issue. However, you can get certain places to prescribe them and essentially they're free, or you can come to the student health center. We always have external condoms like right? You walk in and you grab external condoms, and those are free and you can grab those. I have internal condoms and we try to keep a stock of them. So if that is something you want, you can come visit us or make an appointment and talk about like, hey, how can I get like a supply of internal condoms? Because I mean, $6 each, like this is like 33 cents. It's like a big difference. Okay, barrier methods aren't 100% effective. Genital herpes, syphilis, and HPV are spread through skin-to-skin contact. And so this is why even when using a barrier method, there's some risk of STI exposure. But let's talk a little bit more about condoms for a second here. So I have some fun facts. Condoms have sizes. We'll talk more about that in a second. Condoms shouldn't hurt. So there's like often like the, oh, I can't wear that, it hurts. Check the size, check the ingredient type, and like the type being used. So some people have like a latex allergy or something like that. Condoms are 86% effective against preventing HIV, STIs, and pregnancy. They're actually 98% effective, but there's a lot of user error, which brings it down to the 86%. They're vegan condoms. So as a vegan, my cow shirt. Condoms expire, and that's like one of the really important things, right? To always check. And going back to like when it's like, oh no, it's too small, I can't wear it. They can stretch like over 3 feet. So you can like I can fit like a condom past my elbow. So it's just saying. There's also over 50 sizes of condoms. If like you really are like, I'm struggling to find a condom that fits, there's places like onecondom.com that you can find 50 sizes. So also if you're like, oh, maybe the condom's too big or something like that, there's usually 3 or 4 size options in stores. And again, condoms can hold nearly 1 gallon of liquid. So the whole like, it's too small, not necessarily. Again, go back to maybe checking the size or the ingredients, and never, ever, ever use 2 condoms simultaneously. Okay, so going back to sizes, if they're too tight, there's a risk of them breaking. So that's why you don't want to wear a condom that's too small. And if they are too big, they can slip off or cause semen to leak. So how do you tell what size condom? Well, start with a regular condom. Does it slip off? Does it feel too tight? And then you can adjust from there. There's also like, you can technically do like measurements and all of that, but there's the average size chart. Okay, who wants to volunteer to show how to put a condom on? You can win this perfect flamingo sticker. All right. Anyone else want to accompany? Have like a little 2-part condom race? I mean, what else? You just gotta try to put a condom on in class. I'm gonna grade for accuracy. We're all gonna grade for accuracy. No? No one else? Okay. Oh, yes. Okay. Hey. All right. Little friendly competition. Okay, way to start. We're all gonna like watch. I think just have to watch this individual and I have to watch this individual, and I will try to watch both. Let me know how they do. I'm gonna grade for accuracy. Ready, set, go. Good time to get a new one.
I feel like that guy in the movie.
All right, we'll take 2,
40-year-old.
and then we'll go over it. Look at me handing out faulty condoms.
Savage.
It's all part of the lesson, I swear.
There's something to be learned.
If it breaks, don't carry on. Give a round of applause for being good sports. And you get this wonderful clothing bullying sticker. Feel free to scan it each side to take for sexual health. You know, like my penis is back. All right, so what did we think? What went well? What didn't go well? Was there anything that you're like, oh, you missed this step, which it's fine. A lot of pressure just in class putting a condom on.
Don't hold too hard.
Don't pull too hard. What else? Do we feel like they nailed it? Was there any advice?
I think it's relatively.
You struggled to open it?
Maybe like.
Yep. Anything else?
I also prefer, make sure you put it on the right side.
That's a big one. I will say I did condom relay races during my health fair, and like there was a solid amount of people who put it on like the wrong way. So that's not unheard of. Okay, so I'm gonna walk through the few things that I saw maybe someone didn't do. But it goes back to that why they're only 86% effective. So the very first thing is, let me find my trusty condoms. Nobody checked the expiration date. No, condoms expire, right? That makes it more likely to break or brittle. They do make like very small size. So I'm like, but these were not expired. However, no one checked the date. The other thing to check is there an air pocket? Why do we check that? No hole, right? So some people are, I'm gonna keep it in my wallet, I'm gonna keep it in my car with my keys. That pokes a hole in it and you'll lose that air pocket, right? So like step 1, check the expiration date. Step 2, check for air. Then when putting on the condom, you did say the right thing about making sure you have it the right. I'm just gonna advance the slide. I think I have enough lube on my hands for the day. Making sure you roll it the right direction. So it kind of should look like a little hat and naturally want to roll a direction. If you're struggling to roll it, chances are it's the wrong direction. Also, no one pinched the tip. Why do we pinch the tip before rolling?
For like that space.
Yep, for semen, right? So check the expiration, check for air pocket, pinch the tip, unroll it the correct direction, and then excellent job. This one has it rolled way down. So you want to roll it as far as possible so it doesn't slip off. So now we know our condom errors. Any questions on that? Yeah.
I'm getting a 0 because I broke the first one.
No, because you got a second one, and that's all that matters. But I think that was all. Thank you for being good sports. Educational for all of us. Okay, so obviously the risk of passing STIs is high with vaginal and penile sex, right? STIs can be passed even if the penis doesn't fully enter the vagina or ejaculation does not occur. And then many infections are present in pre-ejaculation fluid. And then again, some can be passed skin to skin. We talked about internal condoms, but just a quick diagram in case anyone's interested, right? This is going to be inserted directly into the vagina or anus. Never use internal and external. And then remove the inner ring if you're using it for anal sex. Okay, we're wrapping up here. So the biggest thing with STIs, right, and having safer sex and all of that, it's a really good idea to make a plan before you have sex, because then it's kind of like hard in the moment to be like, we don't have 7 to 10 days to wait for the dental dams to ship, right? Like, so it's good to have a plan before you have sex. And then you have a right to ask for what you need, right? So you have a right to ask about STI testing, if you're exploring a relationship, to talk about safer sex methods. I think it's really important to be able to have those conversations and feel safe to have that with anyone you're having sexual intercourse with. And then what kind of conversations, like I got a lot on that, like how to insist on using a condom, consent, boundary conversations. Consent. There's like 7 different brochures over here, so feel free to grab what you like. And then it's always important to think about power dynamics, because that can be tricky, but you are your own best advocate. And we're at the Student Health Center there to help you, whether that's like through STI testing, sexual health counseling, or any questions you have that aren't answered or covered, or even if you want to talk to like a mental health provider about like how to navigate those power dynamics or relationships. We have like a pretty extensive sexual health page on our website. So you can always go to the more part called Student Health Center. Did everybody get, I know a few people walked in after, but one of our little brochures. So we have a QR code you can scan to go to our homepage and go to our sexual health page from there. So we have like inclusive sexual health information, lots of different things. Again, you can always get free external condoms. I still have some dental dams if anyone would like any, and you can get internal condoms at the Student Health Center. And then with sexual health, I didn't say this, but there's like a very big like misnomer often that like women who have sex with women, especially if they've only exclusively had sex with women, don't need pap tests. Like that's like an old misnomer in the world. That's not true, right? So anyone with a cervix should get a pap test starting at 21. And so we do offer that at the Student Health Center. Sexual health and STI testing is free for almost all students. So we sign you up for Family Pact and you can get access to all of this if you qualify, which almost everyone qualifies. And with that, free condoms, birth control, STI testing, PAPs, and more. And then also on our website, we have our Safe Zone page, which has lots of good information too, as far as like the LGBTQ plus community and all of that, which I'm just going to do a quick plug. Technically, the date to sign up for this is passed, but this Friday we are having Lavender graduation, and I've done like a lot of work to planning that. And if anyone still wants to sign up to attend, I will not close the form until later today. So you can attend Lavender graduation. It's an LGBTQ plus graduation among all 3 colleges in our district at Oxnard College this Friday. And it's gonna be super fun. There's gonna be like a party vibe. We'll have like swag, DJ, all of that, and then a small ceremony. So, with that, I have a small survey if you don't mind. And then I will turn that back, but any questions, any debrief? Anyone's like, I'm overwhelmed. Yeah.
Isn't that like pre-ed medication for people with like HIV is designed for people who are at risk? Is that like people who are having sex with people who have HIV supposed to take it?
So it's really like, that's where it's like important to have the full conversation with a healthcare provider, because some people could be having sex with like multiple partners and they'll say like that puts you at enough risk, or it can be like, oh, within this community, if you are having unprotected sex, or it doesn't have to just be someone's HIV positive that you're having sex with. There's like other risk factors that may balance it out. But yeah, someone who is, if you are having sex with someone who's HIV positive, even if they're on like antiretroviral therapy, it can be a good idea to be on PrEP as well. But again, like your health, and we have a doctor, we have a nurse, we have all of that. So they're really good at having those conversations with students. And this is what we do, like college health. So we're like, this is kind of our jam, you know. But great question. Yeah.
My phone's antivirus locking this.
Okay, no worries. That's totally cool. It's just as I like to get a few opinions so I know, like, did I scar everyone? Did I help anyone? What can I do better? What can I do worse? So just and then please feel free to like grab info. I'll hang out too for a few minutes if anyone has any specific questions. But I really appreciate everyone tuning in today, and thank you for inviting me to class.
When you're done with this, you're welcome to go and grab some information if you have questions, and then we'll keep going on to this new one.
And if anyone wants to scan this to sign up.
Oh, I think that you.
How did I say it? Talking about
Thank you.
I know.
Oh, I was looking at it, there's like Purell hand wipes over there. I should have brought it over to you. Cause, yeah, sticky.
Sticky.